Hey guys, Sam here from Sugar Spun Run, and today I'm going to be sharing my favorite scone recipe. This scone recipe is one of my family's all-time favorites. They're so easy to make, tender, flaky, and buttery. I've shared a few other variations on the blog before. I have chocolate chip scones, and I have some with raspberries and other fruits, but I've never shared a classic scone recipe, and that's what I want to share today. Now for today's recipe, I'm going to highly recommend that you use a food processor. If you don't have a food processor, you can absolutely make these scones by just using either a pastry cutter or grating your butter and cutting that into your flour mixture like I did with my homemade biscuits that I shared the other day. But I have found that using a food processor is the best way to get light and flaky scones. When you try to cut the butter in by hand, it tends to get a little warm and it can be really hard to work all the ingredients together. Using the food processor eliminates all of this handling of the butter, keeps it from getting too soft, keeps your scone dough from getting too soft or overworked. So if you have a food processor, I highly recommend using it. To begin, you'll first need to preheat your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Then, we'll add 2 cups of all-purpose flour to the bowl of the food processor. We'll also add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now we'll put our lid on our food processor and we'll just briefly pulse everything. With our dry ingredients combined, now we will need 8 tablespoons or 1/2 cup of unsalted butter. You want this butter to be very cold. What I like to do is about 15 minutes before I start making my scones, I'll just place a stick of butter in the freezer and let that get really cold for about 15 minutes. Then we'll cut this up into tablespoon-sized pieces. As you can see, this butter is really cold and a little bit hard to cut. Because of this, I don't recommend freezing your butter for longer than 15 minutes. We'll sprinkle these butter pieces over our dry ingredients. And now we're just going to pulse these ingredients together just until the butter is completely combined and the mixture might look a little bit like coarse crumbs. Another way you can tell if the butter is well combined is that your food processor will stop jumping around from the cold butter hitting the blades. Let's take a look at what this looks like. At this point, our mixture just looks like coarse crumbs. So now we're going to add the heavy cream. We need a 1/2 cup of heavy cream for this recipe. And because I like my scones to be slightly vanilla flavored, I'm going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract to my heavy cream before I add this to the ingredients. We'll just pour this evenly over our dry ingredients. And you do want to make sure that the heavy cream is very cold as well. And we are going to pulse this until the mixture starts to really clump together. As you can see, the ingredients have started to clump together into a ball and they'll be really nice and cohesive. Now we're going to transfer this dough over to a clean, lightly floured surface. And I like to make my scone dough on my marble cutting board because it helps keep the butter nice and cold, but you can use any clean surface. Now at this point, if you wanted to add any of your favorite add-ins, like maybe chocolate chips or frozen berries, you would add them before you clump the dough together and kind of work them into the dough at this point. I would recommend not using more than about a 1/2 cup of add-ins. Now we'll use our hands to form this dough into a disc. And keep in mind, we don't want to overwork this dough. And then I'll lightly flour the dough again, just because it's a little sticky. And then I'll fold it over itself, rotate the dough 90 degrees, fold it over itself again. And I'm going to repeat this about 5 times. So I'll be folding the dough over itself about 5 times total. What this does is it's going to give your scones those nice flaky layers. Okay, once our dough has been folded over itself about 5 times, now we're going to form it into a disc that's about 6 inches wide by 1 inch thick. Don't feel like you need a ruler to measure this, I usually just eyeball it. But you do want the disc to be pretty even in width. Now we will cut our scones into wedges, which I am told is an American thing to do, as people in other countries evidently prefer their scones round. To do this, you'll need a large knife. Take this knife and press straight down into the scone dough when cutting your wedges. This gives us 8 wedges, which we are going to transfer to a parchment paper lined baking sheet. Place your scones about 2 inches apart. Now, this step is totally optional, but one thing I really like to do is take a bit of heavy cream, I'd say about 2 tablespoons, and a pastry brush, and gently brush heavy cream over each scone. Once we've brushed all of our scones with heavy cream, we can add additional granulated sugar on top. This is going to give our scones a nice, crisp, sweet exterior. Again, you can totally skip this step, but I have quite a sweet tooth, so I always like to do this. Now we'll bake these scones on 375 degrees Fahrenheit for about 15 minutes or until the tips are just beginning to turn golden brown. That is how you make scones. And not just any scones, but my family's all-time favorite scone recipe. As you guys just saw, these are so easy to make, and the end result is these flaky, buttery, and delicious scones. Some people like to add jam to theirs. I just enjoy mine as is with their nice sugar-coated tops. I hope you guys will try these out, and please let me know what you think. They're so good, I am so sure you are going to love them. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.